In terms of violence towards energy firms, every day we collect risk-relevant events. And if you just look at the number of, say, terrorism-related events against energy infrastructure, in the last 12 months we've seen about a 15% increase. And that risk is localised in 5 countries, which constitute over 3/4 of those events. So we're talking Yemen, Colombia, Syria, Pakistan and Iraq. And of those, Iraq has seen the biggest increase, about 75%. And given the recent insurgency in central Iraq, that trend is only likely to continue. But overall, the trend isn't dramatic. If you look at civil unrest-related events, actually you see a much more dramatic set of trends. First off, the risk is more widespread. So there are about 20 countries that have got a significant civil unrest threat to energy infrastructure. And if you look at numbers of events globally in terms of civil unrest, you're looking at about a 15% increase in the number of events. But if you then focus in on civil unrest related to energy infrastructure, it's about 3 times that factor, about 54%. So what you're looking at there is that energy infrastructure, which comes from local communities having grievances against these companies, actually has become a much greater proportion of civil unrest globally. So in terms of understanding the drivers behind those trends, essentially energy infrastructure is an attractive target to anyone with a grievance. It tends to be a strategic asset for the government. So if you want to get your point across, if you want to get heard, disrupting it or attacking it is a good way of doing that. And secondly, a lot of the infrastructure involved is actually remote and hard to secure. So if you think about pipelines, for instance, so there's an inherent vulnerability in the infrastructure as well. But if you want to understand the drivers behind the disruptive attacks, you have to go beyond the figures and look at what's causing it. So if you look at Colombia, for instance, which is one of the 5 big countries for terrorism attacks, actually saw a 20% reduction in the last 12 months in terrorist attacks, largely because of the peace talks between the government and the main terrorist organisations. But that was more than supplanted by a massive increase in civil unrest against energy infrastructure, a 160% increase in the number of events. And what we're talking about here is local community opposition to energy infrastructure projects and the firms that are running them. And you're talking about locals not feeling they're benefiting from the projects, from the extraction of the assets, and also that their assets are being taken away from them. And if you don't understand the way that the risk has switched in this instance and in lots of others, you can't put your risk mitigation factors in place properly. If we look at what this means for energy firms in the future, one of the concepts that's often talked about is something called a social license to operate, which basically means the acceptance of the local community and the support of the local community for a company coming in and working in that environment. And if we look at the terrorism side of things, actually it's got a limited impact because by definition, the terrorist target is the government or the state. The target of the attack is almost a means to the end. It's not the company themselves that's the primary target, although foreign companies are often highlighted as a target by terrorist groups. But it's the pressure you can put on the government by disrupting this strategic asset. So while your engagement with the local community is important because for lots of reasons, but not least because you can change the permissiveness of the environment for terrorists to operate. Actually, you're going to want to look more at preventing the attacks themselves. So you're going to look at protective security. Again, it's in civil unrest where you start to get this social license to operate concept coming. So if we look at Nigeria, for instance, we've seen a large increase in terrorist attacks in Nigeria by Boko Haram. But they tend to be in the north and the northeast where their stronghold is. And a lot of the Nigerian infrastructure is in the south in the Niger Delta. And the disruption to infrastructure in the Niger Delta, we've seen over doubling of the number of events in the Niger Delta, is largely due to a group called MEND and youths in the Niger Delta who are angry at their assets being stolen. One of our sources has told us that if you're transporting oil and particularly gas out of the delta to other parts of the country, you're far more likely to be attacked than those who are keeping it in the delta. So as soon as you understand that, and as soon as you understand that the Nigeria risk environment is not the risk environment that you're operating in, you can start to put in place an engagement strategy and understand what you need to do and who you need to talk to reduce the risk of you and your company and your infrastructure being attacked.